A little girl walked 1 mile home and vanished forever while 90 million Americans watched the Super Bowl that night. Police had no suspect, no body, and no answers until a blurry camera behind a car wash changed everything completely. She left her friend's house at 6:15 and was grabbed by a stranger before she ever made it home. The man on the surveillance footage looked straight at detectives and said 4 words that made every officer's blood run cold. An 11-year-old girl was taken in broad daylight, and the person responsible had already broken the law 13 times before. The police radio crackled with a call that no officer ever wants to receive. A child was missing in Sarasota, Florida, and every second felt like a countdown nobody could stop. It was February 1st, 2004, and while 90 million Americans watched the Super Bowl, a nightmare was unfolding in the dark streets outside. Detectives rushed out into the night, not knowing this case would haunt them forever. The name they were about to hear was Carly Bruscha, and within days the entire country would know it. Carly was born on March 16, 1992, in Long Island, New York, to her parents Joe and Susan. Her parents divorced the following year, and Carly moved with her mother to Sarasota, where she spent most of her childhood. She never lost her connection to Long Island and visited relatives there every winter and summer break without fail. Christmas on Long Island was her absolute favorite time of year, full of family warmth and holiday magic. Her mother Susan later remarried a man named Stephen, and together they built a home that Carly filled with energy every single day. Everyone who knew Carly described her the same exact way, using words like warm, genuine, energetic, and full of light. Her teacher said she was sweet in a way that never felt forced, and her school principal called her a shining light with complete honesty. At McIntosh Middle School, she greeted every person in the hallway with a big open hug and a real smile. She sang in the choir, played sports, adored her cat Charlie, and was completely obsessed with Jennifer Lopez. She was the kind of kid who made ordinary days feel worth remembering, and everyone around her felt that without being able to explain it. The day before she vanished, Carly had spent the night at a friend's house for a completely normal sleepover. Around 6:15 on Super Bowl Sunday evening, she said her goodbyes and prepared to walk home alone. Her home was only 1 mile away, and the walk seemed simple enough to her. Before she left, her friend's mother called Susan to confirm whether Carly had permission to walk by herself. Susan's answer was immediate and firm: absolutely not. She explained that Bridge Road could be unpredictable, and she had never given Carly permission to make that walk alone. Susan spoke with Stephen right away, and without hesitating, he got in his car and drove toward the friend's house to pick Carly up. The streets that evening were unusually quiet because most families across Sarasota were inside watching the Super Bowl. Stephen drove slowly through the neighborhood, scanning every sidewalk and every shadow for a girl in a red shirt and pink backpack. There was nothing. No movement, no sign, no Carly anywhere on those empty streets. Panic rose in his chest with every block he covered, and the silence that once felt peaceful now felt terrifying and wrong. She had completely vanished, and there was not a single trace left behind. 1 hour after she was last seen, a call came through to 911, and the voice on the line was a mother barely holding herself together. "My daughter's missing," Susan said, her voice breaking completely as she spoke those words into the phone. Police responded immediately, and officers flooded the area, knocking on doors and questioning every neighbor they could find. They spoke with Carly's friends, trying to piece together her last known movements before she disappeared. Investigators also learned that Carly had seemed a little upset during the sleepover because there had been an argument between her mom and stepfather, and she had wanted to leave early. The search pushed on until 3 in the morning, but Carly was still nowhere to be found, and 12 hours had passed since anyone last saw her. When Carly did not show up at school the next morning, investigators brought in tracking dogs, using her pillowcase to capture her scent. A bloodhound named Ruby picked up the trail immediately and led detectives straight to the Ease car wash at 4715 Bridge Road. Then the scent stopped completely and without any warning at all. Officers secured the area and spoke with the car wash owner, who told them the property had motion. Activated security cameras at different positions. The footage near the main road and parking lot showed nothing unusual, but when officers checked the camera at the back of the property, everything changed. A clip recorded at exactly 6:21 that evening showed a young girl in a red shirt, blue jeans, and a pink backpack, exactly what Carly had been wearing when she left her friend's house. Then another figure entered the frame, and every officer watching went completely silent. A man about 5 feet 8 inches tall with dark hair, a visible tattoo on his arm, and a mechanic's work shirt with a blurry name patch walked directly toward the girl. He stopped in front of her. They exchanged a few words, and then he grabbed her by the arm and led her out of frame and into whatever darkness followed. Every detective watching that footage understood immediately that Carly was in life-threatening danger, and the weight of that realization was impossible to shake. The footage lasted only seconds, but it painted the most terrifying picture any of them had ever seen. Stephen was brought in for questioning and provided one detail that proved critically important. While driving along Bridge Road searching for Carly, he had noticed a red pickup truck moving back and forth along that same stretch repeatedly. He also remembered seeing that same red truck parked outside the friend's house when he arrived there that evening. Police identified the truck's owner as a man named Rong Wu, had been at the friend's house the night before and brought him in immediately. Ron denied everything, and investigators verified through his time cards and supervisor that he was at work at 6:21, so he was cleared. But clearing Ron meant police still had no idea who the man in the video was or where he had taken Carly. Going back through the footage a second time, investigators spotted something they had completely missed before. A light yellow 1992 Buick Century station wagon pulled into the parking lot exactly 3 minutes before Carly was taken from the car wash. Moments later, that same Buick pulled back onto Bridge Road and slowed down right in front of the car wash, as if the driver was watching and waiting for exactly the right moment. A reward of $25,000 was announced, and over 800 tips poured in from the public within days. Several callers gave investigators the exact same name, Joseph Peter Smith. A woman who had once worked with Smith called police after seeing the surveillance footage on television, saying she recognized him immediately from his haircut, his sneakers, and the specific way he moved and reached out his arm. Her husband called and gave police Smith's name and address, and detectives drove there in an unmarked car. They knocked on the front door and nobody answered, so they contacted Smith's probation officer, who sent someone to the residence. About 45 minutes later, Smith's sister arrived and agreed to go inside and asked him to come out and face investigators directly. Joseph Peter Smith was 37 years old, originally from Brooklyn, a father of 3, and carrying a criminal record dating back to 1993, with at least 13 prior arrests. His record included heroin possession, cocaine possession, prescription drug fraud, and a prior kidnapping case in which he had been acquitted. He had violated probation multiple times, served 17 months in custody, and was arrested again just 8 days after his release. He stood calmly in front of investigators as they asked where he had been on the day Carly disappeared, and he said he had never been near that car wash at all. When detectives showed him the still image from the surveillance footage, he looked at it and said something that sent a chill through everyone in the room. "That looks like me," he said slowly, "but it's not me." He agreed to let investigators search his car and his rented room, and when they went through his belongings, they found a mechanic's work uniform with a name patch sewn onto the front. His vehicle contained drug paraphernalia, which gave police grounds to arrest him immediately for probation violation. Then, as officers were still processing the scene, the woman who owned the home where Smith rented a room pulled up in her car, a light yellow Buick Century station wagon, the exact vehicle seen at the car wash 3 minutes before Carly was taken. Her husband Jeff later came to the station and told investigators his wife had gotten the timing completely wrong. Smith had borrowed the Buick on the evening of the abduction, was supposed to return it in 15 minutes, and did not come back until the following morning, looking unusually clean and calm in a way that felt deeply wrong to everyone who saw him. When Jeff examined the car afterward, items inside had been moved around and the back seat had been folded completely flat down. He handed the vehicle to forensic investigators, who later found 2 of Carly's hairs inside the car and 7 fibers that matched her red shirt exactly. NASA was brought in to enhance the blurry name patch from the surveillance footage, and once the image was sharpened, the badge clearly read one single word: Joe. Smith's brother John came to the station and spoke with FBI agents, telling them he had recognized Joseph the moment the footage aired on television, and so had his girlfriend. John warned agents directly that if Joseph was involved, he would never confess on his own and would take that secret to his grave. Investigators allowed Joseph to meet privately with his brother and mother for 90 minutes, and when John came out, his words were slow and heavy. He said Joseph had come incredibly close to confessing, that something in his tone felt like a man standing right at the edge of a line, but he never fully crossed it. Later that night, John called the FBI and said something confusing. "You've probably already heard," and his voice was broken in a way that told agents something had just happened. They realized Joseph had already passed location information to his brother from inside the station, and John, believing his phone was tapped, was trying to communicate it, without saying anything direct. 3 officers, including 2 FBI agents, rushed to John's home immediately, and there inside that heavy silence, John finally gave them an address on Proctor Road near Interstate 75. Around 1 in the morning, behind the Central Church of Christ in thick brush, authorities found the body of Carly Bruscha. She was unclothed below the waist, except for 1 sock still on her right foot, and a deep ligature mark around her neck told investigators everything about how her life had been stolen from her. Joseph Smith's DNA was found on her clothing, and forensic experts testified the probability of a random match. was 1 in 30 to quintillion, making any alternate explanation virtually impossible. The autopsy confirmed she had been dragged into the field and strangled from behind, and ligature marks on her wrists showed she had been bound and restrained, proving the crime was deliberate and planned. A letter Smith wrote to his brother from prison was later intercepted and decoded, and in it he wrote that he had dumped her backpack and clothes in 4 different trash bins, dragged her body to where it was found, and told his brother to destroy the letter after reading it. On December 1st, the jury voted 10-2, recommending death by lethal injection, and the judge formally sentenced Joseph Peter Smith to death the following March. His appeals dragged on for nearly 2 decades, forcing Carly's family to relive the pain again and again through every court hearing and legal proceeding. On July 26, 2021, 17 years after he took Carly's life, Joseph Peter Smith died at a Union Correctional Institution from liver disease, never formally charged in the unsolved murder of 25-year-old Tara Riley, whose case remains open to this day. Carly Bruscha was 11 years old with a whole life ahead of her that she never got to live. She had dreams that never had time to take shape, friendships that should have lasted decades, and a future stolen from her on a quiet Sunday evening while the rest of the country celebrated. Her memorial garden at the Central Church of Christ still stands as a place where people come to remember a girl who made everyone around her feel like they truly mattered. She was a shining light in the darkness that took her, should never have been allowed to get that close.